At the family Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter poured something in a drink and gave to me, thinking I wasn't looking at her. She said, "To the sweetest dad on earth." So I called her son and gave him the drink. After 20 minutes, everyone was devastated to see what happened. It was really unbelievable. I will tell you how it all unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to James Seamer from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. Thanksgiving was my holiday. Always had been. I hosted it like a commander running a well-oiled operation. Turkey in the oven by 6 a.m., pies cooled by noon, table set with the same blue china my mother gave me when I got married. I was a man of routines. A retired high school principal, I lived by the bell, even long after I'd stopped hearing one. And for the past 3 years, since my wife and I divorced, the family dinner had become my last remaining symbol of order, of continuity. So when Liana said she was coming this year, I was surprised. Shocked, really. We hadn't spoken much over the past year. She claimed it was because she was busy with work and raising Marcus. But I knew better. She had resentment in her. Deep, tangled, and old. Resentment for how strict I was, for how I never praised her the way she wanted. She thought I favored Marcus, her own son, over her. Maybe I did. The boy had her same eyes, but none of her cruelty. Still, I told her she was welcome. Of course, I said when she called. It's family. You'll always have a seat at my table. And I meant it at the time. But something about her tone, it was lighter. Fake, even. She didn't ask who else would be there, didn't ask if I needed her to bring anything. She just said, "Don't worry, I'll bring a surprise." The day arrived crisp and cold, the kind of late November afternoon where the wind smells faintly of chimney smoke. I wore my best cardigan, made a bourbon glaze for the ham, and made sure Marcus's favorite mac and cheese was on the table. When they arrived, she hugged me, actually hugged me, and said, "You look good, Dad." I remember thinking, what the hell is going on? Marcus ran off to play with the neighbor's kids in the yard. He was 8, with an energy that buzzed like static. Liana helped in the kitchen for the first time in years. She chopped onions without being asked, even set the table without complaint. She was pleasant, and that scared me more than her usual scorn. After dinner, when the table was cleared and everyone was lounging in that post-turkey haze, she brought over 2 glasses of something fizzy. "Try this new apple cider blend," she said, eyes wide with charm. "To the sweetest dad on earth." I chuckled on the outside, but inside something clanged hard, like a dropped pot in a quiet kitchen. She handed me the glass. Her eyes flicked toward it for a second too long. I've seen students cheat, lie, bluff. I know that glance, that hesitation, that fake smile. So I smiled back, and in that moment, my instincts made a choice my mind couldn't process yet. I stood up, called over Marcus, and said, "Hey, buddy, come give this a taste. Tell me if it's too sweet for your old grandpa." He grinned, took the glass, and sipped. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was to test her. Maybe it was to show her I wasn't as oblivious as she thought. But in that moment, I was still just toying with a suspicion. I didn't actually believe. 20 minutes later, the world collapsed. Marcus was on the floor, twitching. His lips went blue. My niece screamed. Plates crashed. I called 911 with a voice I barely recognized as my own. His little body convulsed. Foam at the mouth. His mother, frozen, didn't move to help. Didn't scream. Just stood there. "Do something." I shouted at her. "Call an ambulance." I don't," she stammered. And finally one of my neighbors took over, pressing napkins to his face, trying CPR, sobbing. The paramedics arrived like angels of death. They took him away. I followed in my car, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't even feel. I just drove. At the hospital, under the harsh fluorescent lights, they told me he was gone. And right there, standing in a sterile hallway that smelled of bleach and grief, I remembered her face. The smile. The glance. I told the police what I saw. I gave them the glass. I showed them the footage from my security camera. The officers were quiet at first, then grim. They found what they needed. Liana was arrested before dawn. And I sat in the silence of my once warm kitchen, the cider glass still on the counter, and realized the unthinkable. My daughter tried to kill me. She missed. She killed her son instead. Hospitals have a particular kind of quiet after death. Not silence. No, there's always a background hum, a monitor, a distant cough. But it's a quiet that feels suspended, like time's holding its breath. I sat in the waiting area, fingers clenched around the armrests, while the doctor's words still echoed. We did everything we could. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mouth was dry as chalk. They let me see him one last time. Marcus lay on a gurney, a sheet pulled to his chest. His skin looked too pale, his lips too still. I reached out, fingers brushing his hair. Still soft. Still warm, almost. Like he was sleeping. I thought about the way he used to draw pictures of dragons and leave them tucked under my office door. I thought about the time I scolded him for stealing cookies before dinner, and he burst into tears until I caved and gave him 3 more. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I looked back through the glass to where Liana sat between 2 uniformed officers. Her hands were cuffed. Her face, blank. Not sad. Not panicked. Just blank. I remember thinking, she's calculating. Even now. The officer came over, hat in his hands. We'd like to ask her some questions at the station, he said gently. Do you have security cameras in the house, sir? I nodded. Inside and out. Front hallway, living room, kitchen. No blind spots. He nodded back, made a note. We'll need to review the footage. And the glass. You mentioned she handed it to you? Yes, I said. My voice was hoarse. But I gave it to Marcus. The words burned my throat. She didn't resist when they stood to take her away. She didn't look at me. Just walked out, cuffs tight on her wrists, head high like this was some kind of damn parade. By the time I got home, reporters were already on the street. One shouted, Mr. Davis, is it true your daughter poisoned her own son? I didn't answer. I shut the door behind me and locked it twice. Inside, the house smelled like roast turkey and tragedy. Dishes still in the sink. A pie half eaten. His little jacket draped on the back of the chair. And that glass. Still on the counter. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. The police returned that night with a warrant. Took the glass. Took the camera drives. Asked if she had access to any toxic substances. She's a chemist, I said. At least, she used to be. She hasn't worked in months. One of them raised an eyebrow. Any idea why she'd want to hurt you? I hesitated. And then the dam broke. She hated me. I said. Always thought I held her to standards I never held her brother to. She said I made her feel second-rate. She hated that I loved Marcus like I did. Enough to want to kill you? He asked, softly. I think she wanted to punish me. And maybe she didn't care who got caught in the crossfire. It wasn't long before the toxicology report confirmed what we suspected. The drink was laced with oleandrin, a toxin found in ornamental plants. Colorless, tasteless, deadly, intentional. The police called it premeditated. They charged her with attempted murder, mine, and second-degree murder for Marcus. No bail. No leniency. I disowned her that same day. I didn't wait for trial, for appeals, for excuses. I called my lawyer, updated my will, and struck her name from every document that tied her to me in blood or legacy. When he asked me if I was sure, I said, my daughter died the day she put that drink in my hand. And yet, when I went to sleep that night, I dreamed of her as a child. 5 years old, standing in the doorway with a drawing in her hand. I made this for you, Daddy, she'd said. A stick figure with giant glasses and a crooked smile. I'd laughed and hung it on my fridge. I woke up angry that I still had the capacity to miss her. Family started calling. My sister, Deborah, furious. How could you do that to your own daughter? She did it to herself. She's grieving. She killed him, Deb. She killed her son. Maybe it was a mistake. Don't be naive. Old friends reached out with sympathy, but some came with veiled judgments. You were always so strict with her, one said. Did you ever think maybe you pushed her too hard? I hung up mid-sentence. I didn't know anyone my guilt. Grief, though, that was mine. I wore it like a coat I couldn't take off. And every corner of the house reminded me of Marcus. The coloring books. The video games. The way he called me Gramps, like it was a secret code. One evening, I stood in the garage and found his bike. I couldn't look at it. Couldn't touch it. I shut the door and turned off the light. And in the quiet that followed, I heard my own voice echoing back at me. To the sweetest dad on earth. The aftertaste of betrayal lingers longer than poison. I always thought the most painful part of cutting someone out of your will would be the grief. The finality. The quiet act of erasing their name from a place where you once imagined their future. But in truth, it was cold. Mechanical. Efficient. My lawyer, Mitchell, slid the papers across the table like he was handing me a receipt for a sandwich. Just sign here, Henry, he said, not unkindly. And again here, initial there. That's it. Her name vanished from the trust, from the property deed, from the guardianship clauses. Every place where it once read Leanna Marie Davis now had a line or a dash, or, in some places, simply nothing. Mitchell asked if I wanted to assign a new heir. I told him I'd think about it. What I didn't say was that I no longer believed in legacy. What was the point? Everything I had worked for, every class I taught, every hour I spent stockpiling savings for the future had led me to a dining room soaked in death and betrayal. I walked home under a pale sky, briefcase in hand, and passed a couple arguing on the sidewalk. The man was shouting about groceries. The woman hissed something about respect. I wanted to tell them that one day they'd look back and realize none of it mattered. That some betrayals don't come loud or fast. They come in sips, in smiles, in cider glasses. By the time I got home, there was a note under my door. My ex-wife, Janet, had left it. Call me. We need to talk. We hadn't spoken in months. I used to blame her for Liana's hardness, said she was too lenient, too emotionally distant. But now, what was there to say? I called anyway. She picked up on the second ring. I heard about the will, she said flatly. I figured you would. You don't think that's a little harsh? She tried to kill me, Janet. She didn't mean to kill Marcus. That makes it worse. There was silence on the line. Then, she's still your daughter. No, I said, my voice cold as frost. She was my daughter. Now she's just a woman who murdered her son in my house. You really think she wanted you dead? I know she did. Then why give the drink to Marcus? I paused. That was the question I hadn't dared to ask myself in full. Why hadn't she stopped him when I handed him the glass? Why hadn't she screamed, slapped it out of his hands, done something? Because in that moment, I think she chose silence over exposure. Because admitting she had poisoned me meant admitting intent. And letting Marcus drink it meant escape. Or maybe she thought he wouldn't sip it. Maybe she thought I wouldn't switch it. Maybe she didn't care anymore. Janet and I hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, the story hit the local paper. Retired principal's daughter arrested in fatal poisoning. Family speaks out. They quoted a close family source who claimed Liana had been unstable for years, that she had conflicts with me, that she resented Marcus's closeness to me. My sister, no doubt. She'd always been too eager to be the voice of reason in a room full of trauma. I received 2 death threats in the mail that week. One called me a murderer. Another called me a coward. Both were handwritten. Both went straight into the trash. The strange thing was, amid all the chaos, I began to feel something close to relief. The truth was out. The lines had been drawn. No more pretending. No more awkward dinners. No more tiptoeing around her coldness, hoping for scraps of warmth. I had clarity. It came at the cost of my grandson's life, but it was clarity nonetheless. I started boxing up Marcus's things slowly. One drawer at a time. A toy dinosaur. A crayon drawing of the 2 of us on a park bench. His favorite red hoodie with a grape juice stain down the front. I folded each item carefully, like ritual offerings to a god I no longer believed in. I kept one thing, a small voice recorder. He used to carry it around, pretending he was a detective. I clicked play one night and heard his voice chirp. This is Marcus Davis, and today's mystery is, why does Gramps hide candy in his sock drawer? I laughed. A real, painful, beautiful laugh. Then I cried so hard my chest hurt. I found myself talking to him at night, telling him what I'd done, how I'd erased his mother, how I wished I could have saved him, how sorry I was. Not because I gave him the drink, no, I didn't know, but because I hadn't protected him from her long before that. I'd seen the signs, the anger, the instability, and I'd told myself she was just going through something. I lied to myself. We all do that, don't we? For family. We excuse. We rationalize. We carry buckets of hope into burning buildings and act surprised when we get scorched. But no more. I had drawn my boundary. She would never step foot in my house again. She would never touch a penny of what I had built. And when I died, I would die knowing I had chosen the truth over the lie of blood. The funeral was held on a bleak Tuesday morning, gray clouds hanging so low they seemed to press against the earth like a warning. Marcus's casket was small. Far too small. Children's coffins shouldn't exist, and yet here it was, polished mahogany trimmed in silver, the absurd final bed for a boy who still had baby teeth. I chose the plot myself. Quiet, shaded, near the base of a maple tree that would flame red in the fall. He would have liked that. There were only 30 or so people there. Some family. A few teachers from his school. Neighbors. His little classmates came with their parents, confused, clinging to teddy bears and tissues. I saw one of them hand a folded piece of paper to the funeral director, something she'd drawn for him. The sight of it broke me. I gave the eulogy because no one else could. Janet couldn't look at the casket. My sister didn't offer. And of course, Liana was absent, locked in a cell, awaiting arraignment. I stood before them all, clearing my throat against a wind that bit deep. Marcus, I said, my voice trembling, was joy in motion. He asked more questions than most adults have answers for. He wanted to know how airplanes fly, why rain smells different in spring, why I always wore wool socks. He called me Gramps, with the same reverence most kids reserve for superheroes. And he made me believe in the idea that some love could skip a generation and still bloom twice as bright. I paused, trying to swallow the lump rising in my throat. I don't have answers today, not for why this happened, not for what he went through. But I do know this, he was loved. And I will carry him with me every day, in memory, in story, in the man I choose to be. I sat down, hands shaking. The priest said a few words I barely registered. Dirt hit the casket with a thud that echoed inside my bones. Afterward, people came up with their condolences, most careful, some too familiar. One woman squeezed my hand and whispered, "I hope she rots." I didn't respond. I didn't have the strength. The news vans were parked a block away, respecting the church's request for distance but not decency. They snapped photos from behind bushes. My neighbor, Alan, tried to chase one off with a cane. I was grateful for the gesture. But the worst came that evening. I received an email from someone I didn't recognize. The subject line was "Blood Doesn't Lie." It was a screed, accusing me of manipulating the story, of fabricating the poisoning, of setting my daughter up because I couldn't handle being outshone by her intellect. It accused me of jealousy, of misogyny, of being emotionally tyrannical. I didn't respond. I couldn't. But the words lodged in me like splinters. And in the quiet of that night, I began to question everything again. Had I created her? Had I failed her so catastrophically that she became capable of murder? What kind of father raises a child who could look her own son in the eye and still let him drink poison? I found myself pacing the house at 3 a.m., touching old picture frames, flipping through albums. There she was at 7, wearing a princess dress. At 12, holding her science fair trophy. At 16, with a sharp look in her eye and her arms crossed, already pulling away. I remembered how she used to beg for more time outside. How I always told her no, rules are rules, Liana. How I made her practice piano even when her fingers ached. How I pushed her into advanced classes, into debate, into expectations she didn't want. I thought I was shaping her for greatness. Maybe I was just sanding her into bitterness. I don't know. And yet, even if I made mistakes, I did not make her this. Grief turned into anger again, hot and unrelenting. I punched the wall in the hallway and fractured my knuckle. I didn't go to the hospital. Just iced it and kept moving. Pain felt right. It felt earned. The next day, I took Marcus's ashes from the funeral home. They handed me the urn like it was nothing, ceramic and too light. I brought him home, set him on the mantel above the fireplace. Then I lit a candle. Just one. I sat there with it until morning. The following weekend, I was invited to speak at a local school assembly about family resilience. I turned it down. What would I say? That resilience is what's left after all the softness in you dies? That sometimes love isn't enough to save anyone? No, I wasn't ready. But I started writing. I wrote letters to Marcus. Letters to Liana I never sent. I started putting pieces of my pain onto paper, not to heal, but to understand. And I began to realize something vital. Grief isn't linear. It doesn't move neatly from sadness to acceptance. It loops. It surprises you. And in its ugliest corners, it demands that you pick a side. I had picked mine. And though I had chosen truth over kin, silence over rage, exile over forgiveness, there was peace in the clarity. Even in ashes, there are echoes. The letter arrived in plain white paper, no return address, just my name written in her old cursive, rounded and dramatic, like she was still 12 trying to impress me with penmanship. "Dad, I need to see you," it began. "Just once. I deserve that much." I stared at it for hours. I read it again while standing at the sink, then again at midnight by candlelight like I expected the words to change under different light. They didn't. They were cold. Not begging. Not sorry. Just expecting. And yet, a week later, I stood inside the visitation room of the county jail, arms crossed, waiting. I wasn't there for her. I was there for the part of me that still needed to look into her eyes and ask why. The door opened. She walked in like nothing had changed. Hair tied back, face bare, prison jumpsuit crisp and orange. If not for the cuffs, you might have thought she was heading to class. She sat across from me and smiled. "You look older," she said. I didn't answer. "You lost weight." "Your son is dead," I said, flat. The smile slipped, but not out of guilt, out of irritation. "I didn't mean for him, but you meant for me." She leaned back, blinking slowly. "You switched the glasses." "Yes." "Why?" "I saw you. I saw the way you looked at me when you handed it over. I've seen that look before, Liana. In students who'd cheated. In people who knew they were doing something wrong and were hoping no one else would catch them." "I didn't cheat," she hissed. "I just wanted you to feel what I've felt my whole damn life." "What's that?" I asked. Disappointed. Small. She leaned forward, her voice low. "I was never enough for you. No matter what I did. Top of my class? Not enough. Published research before 25? Still not enough. But Marcus could do no wrong. You gave him more love in 8 years than you gave me in 38. You were his mother," I said, barely holding back the tremor in my voice. "And you gave him nothing. Not protection. Not warmth. Not even a second thought when he drank what you meant for me." She flinched, but only briefly. Then she whispered he wasn't supposed to drink it. "But he did. And you let him." "I didn't know what to do," she said, staring past me now. I froze. I thought, maybe he'd only have a sip. Maybe it wasn't enough. "I didn't think it would." "You didn't think." I cut in. "That's the first honest thing you've said." The silence between us ballooned. "I loved him," she said at last, but it was empty. "Practiced. And far too late." "No," I replied, standing. "You loved the idea of being loved. But you never understood how to give it." She didn't call after me as I left. Didn't weep. Didn't try to plead. She just sat there, shoulders back, the same posture she had in debate tournaments, waiting for her opponent to slip. But I didn't slip. That night, I dreamed of her again. Not the woman in the jumpsuit, but the girl who used to sit cross-legged on the living room rug with her science kits, bubbling with curiosity. I remembered how I used to watch her from the doorway, coffee in hand, and think, she's going to be brilliant. I never imagined brilliance could curdle. The next morning, the DA called. Trial date set. They wanted me to testify. I said I would. Still, something inside me cracked that day. I realized I wasn't just grieving Marcus anymore. I was grieving the possibility of a daughter. The version of her that might have existed in another life, with better choices, less pride, more love. But that version wasn't real. This one was. I told my therapist later that week. It felt like sitting across from a ghost. Not someone dead. Someone who had never really been alive. He nodded, wrote something in his little notebook, and said, "You protected yourself. And you've paid the price for it." Yes. And I'd do it again. People think there's a line between justice and revenge. But sometimes, they're the same damn thing. You just have to be willing to live with the echo. The house is so quiet now that I hear things I never noticed before, the slow creak of the floorboards under their own weight, the whisper of wind through the chimney, the dull tick of the old wall clock that Marcus once insisted was haunted. I've stopped muting them. Let them speak. The silence is honest. At least it doesn't lie the way she did. I packed up the last of Marcus's things a few days after the trial began. His trial, in a way, The child reduced to an exhibit in court, a victim profile in cold terms. Age, weight, blood content. They call me to the stand early. I wore the same navy suit I wore to the funeral. I wanted the jury to remember I wasn't just a witness. I was a grandfather. I was a man who had been served a drink by his own child, who passed it to another child, and watched the future die on his kitchen floor. They asked if I believed she meant to kill me. Yes. They asked if I believed she cared about what happened to Marcus. No, it was quiet after that. Some in the jury gasped. I didn't flinch. I wanted my stillness to say more than words ever could. Janet didn't come to court. She sent a statement instead, carefully neutral, full of what-ifs and maybes. I didn't blame her. She had her grief, and I had mine, but they didn't live in the same house anymore. The verdict came back faster than I expected. Guilty. On both counts. Attempted murder. Second degree. They read the words out loud, and I waited for a reaction. From her. From myself. Nothing came. She didn't look at me as they let her out. I didn't look at her, either. I walked out of that courtroom and never looked back. Life afterward wasn't peaceful. It wasn't even manageable at first. I found myself standing in the cereal aisle for 30 minutes one afternoon, paralyzed by a box of Frosted Flakes, Marcus's favorite. I almost bought it. I almost brought it home just to open it and remember how he'd laugh at the prize inside. But I didn't. I went home instead and started something new. A scholarship. The Marcus Davis Fund for Young Scientists. Full tuition for kids who reminded me of him, curious, kind, always asking why. I couldn't bring him back, but I could push his life forward. And I could do it on my terms. I still get letters now. From strangers. Some full of sympathy, others full of blame. One woman wrote that she hoped I found peace. Another wrote that I should have forgiven my daughter, that a real man would have kept his family whole. I didn't respond. Because here's what I know now. Blood doesn't define family. Choice does. And I chose to protect myself. I chose truth. I chose to stop sacrificing my peace at the altar of loyalty. Some might call that cruel. But cruelty, I've learned, is smiling at someone while you hand them poison. The quiet house doesn't feel like a punishment anymore. It feels like freedom. I keep Marcus's urn on the mantle, always. And beside it, a small frame with his drawing, the one of me with the crooked smile and glasses too big. It's the only picture I kept from Liana's childhood. I don't know why. Maybe because it reminds me that once, we all began with love. But now, I end with boundaries. And peace. If this story moved you, challenged your perspective, or made you reflect on the weight of family, loyalty, and betrayal, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotionally powerful narratives. Your support helps bring these deeply human stories to life, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Every voice adds to the conversation. See you soon in the next story.